Hello everybody, and thank you for joining today's talk. We're going to talk about a lot of interesting stuff today, the Farming Simulator production pipeline and more. Some of you might have played Farming Simulator already, and some of you might just want to know how we basically make it. So let's dig right in. Let's take a couple of minutes to quickly get acquainted. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and Giants as a company. So my name is Ken Burgess. I'm the release coordinator here at Giant Software. I studied media production and engineering back in the day. I've done some odd jobs on the side during my studies, both in like game press and also some internships in QA. I joined up with Giants in 2017 as a QA analyst, and shortly after I became the QA lead for over 4 years. And last year I joined our self-publishing team as a release coordinator. Some of you might not know this, but we're a completely self-published game, which means we have our own publishing department. So you might be asking, what do I do? Basically, I set up the products across all of our major storefronts, like be it consoles and Steam and Epic and whatnot. And I stay on top of the whole build process, and also when we submit builds to these different platforms and we go through the certification processes. I'm also doing some stuff on the mobile front. So basically I take care of our mobile games. I make sure the visibility and performance is great on the mobile market, and I do some odd other publishing things here and there on the side. So to talk about Giant Software, who are we? What do we do? We do all kinds of things. We're experts in not only software and game development, but we have many people from an agricultural background, for example. So we know our way around machines and the agriculture industry, of course. We're publishers, we're marketers, we do events, we do big esports events as well. I don't know if you've seen that before. Esports is very, very interesting with Farming Simulator. So Giant Software has 4 major offices. So we're based in Zurich in Switzerland. We're based in Erlangen as well in Germany. We have an office in Brno, which is in the Czech Republic, and of course Chicago. Mostly the engine team is based in Zurich, so this is where all of the engine code is in. In Erlangen we have our marketing, our QA, our publishing department. And in Brno we have our vehicle artists, and in Chicago that's where our community and support team also partly resides. So what do we do? Well, Farming Simulator, of course. We started all the way back in 2008 and haven't stopped since. We have over 15 games in the whole series, covering all major platforms and mobile, of course. And we're working in close collaboration with different big agricultural brands as well, because hell, we're a farming game, right? So what we want to give you today is like an insight into the Farming Simulator production pipeline. This means that we're going to be digging into pre-production, also into the meat of the main production pipeline and what that entails. And we're gonna also talk about how Crossplay, which we implemented for FS22, affected this whole production pipeline, and also why we incentivize modding and how we work together with our modding community when it comes to this. Let's start with the first big stepping stone, which is pre-production. Pre-production means ideas, feedback, meetings, data analysis, and much, much more. We usually start with FS Next meetings. This is where we ask questions like, what do we want to see in the next Farming Simulator release? It can also mean, of course, we usually ask like, what does the community wants to see in the Farming Simulator release that's coming up? Maybe also what brands want to be in the game for the next title. We usually do like some proof of concept prototypes, some R&D sessions, basically what kind of things are needed to make these things a reality. That's what we're looking at here. And to set all of this in stone, this is where we use our so-called planner. We're very creative when it comes to this. It's basically an internal planning tool where we can define scopes and content. We can assign different tasks to developers and whatnot. We can link different tasks to each other and to different projects as well. And this also it's like our own proprietary platform, and it ties heavily into production in the later stages, as you're going to see as well. So, but this is basically where everything is initially initiated. The idea is more or less to use this internal planning tool as an ever-growing and dynamic game design document. So basically the tool allows us to plan projects all the way from the concept stage and scopes all the way down through to different vehicles, assets, tools and whatnot, like you know them from a farming simulator game. We can track like things like the model creation, if it's already has been integrated to the game, if it has sound, if it's been tested by QA. It's a big initial stepping stone before we start the main production chunk. So it's basically setting everything up and defining the scope. So to dive a little bit deeper into the main production pipeline, I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the different departments that we have working on it. So the different production entities that we have going at Giant Software. At the start of everything, we have, of course, our engine team. So we are using our own proprietary engine, which is the Giant's engine. The most important thing for us has always been, since 2008, we want to be in full control. So there's no dependencies, no middleware used other than like open source libraries. Usually the engine team is the first that gets to work on a new game or like a new title at Giants, because they are the ones that have to prepare the whole production pipeline for everything. They have to make sure that the engine is going to support the features that we plan on working into the game. They need to make sure that other departments have all the tools that they need to be able to do their work, of course. And afterwards, our art department starts working on this. And to explain this a little bit, we have to look at two different aspects of the art department. For one, it's going to be maps, and the other is going to be vehicles and tools. So let's start with the map department. They need to start super early, because there's a lot of research that goes into making a map for Farming Simulator. We need to define where it's going to take place. Is it going to be in Europe, America, farming in Antarctica maybe? Who knows? So we also set production goals like landmarks or things like selling stations and points of interest that are going to be like a big element on the map. During this process, there's like continuous feedback with our quality assurance department as well. So this way the mappers get like early feedback on how the map feels and plays, because they are the ones designing it, but QA are more or less giving a whole player's perspective for how this map more or less feels. They can kind of tell them, does it make sense? Is it easy to reach everything on the map? And so on and so forth. And afterwards, of course, also there's lots of work that needs to be done for things like objects, characters, buildings, animals, and so forth. So the other side of the art department, so to speak, is the model creation for things like vehicles and tools. So as you can see here, we have a kind of creation loop between our artists, our so-called integrators. They are the ones that take the model basically take the model and prepare it to be integrated into the game. So they like split it up, they take care of animation, of sound. They also take care of like writing different scripts with our gameplay programmers. They make sure that the vehicle, for example, adheres to the physics in our game. And the third department is, of course, QA. And there's this constant exchange of information happening. So while the artists are already working on the models and the asset creation, there's continuous feedback from the integrators. QA also starts with very early visual checks on this. And when it's time for the integrators to integrate these vehicles, of course, QA also helps very strongly with that. And they do different functionality checks. They make sure that everything works in game. And yeah, it's basically this general creation loop is a very heavy, more or less communication loop, as well as this goes on throughout all of the production. So to talk a little bit about the artist side of things, on the vehicles and tools side, we have the model creation. Now there's two ways that we usually are able to create a model. Sometimes we are very, very fortunate enough to get like CAD, so CAD data or custom scans from the manufacturers themselves. And we use this together with like different videos and also images, of course, photos to kind of recreate these models. Other times, if it's, for example, as you can see here in the picture, if it's like a very old tractor, then we might even go out of the way ourselves and scan this tool or vehicle to kind of create a model from this data and bring it into the game. The model is then handed over to the integrators, and our integrators, they are tasked with splitting up the model, setting the animations and whatnot. Everything is prepared to basically bring the model into the game. They take care, also in correspondence with the artists, to set materials to specific elements, like be it the seat or maybe the hull of the tractor. And of course, there's like custom scripts that need to be created. So if it's like a certain complex thing, maybe like something like a chainsaw, or if, for example, you've played the forestry expansion from FS22, you'll know that there were lots of different complicated tools and assets that we didn't have in the game before, and we of course had to write very, very custom scripts for them. So this is also something that's happening with the integrators and the gameplay programming department, and QA is included very early to kind of get feedback, to see if everything works, to see if everything makes sense. And during the integration phase, we need to take care of things like physics as well, so everything kind of feels nice while driving, because a trailer, for example, behaves differently if it's like loaded up with wheat and you drive around with it, or if it's empty. Another part of our integration department is, of course, our audio department. And they are also tasked with, whenever we, for example, go out and scan a vehicle that we need data from, they accompany the team. They take care of recording different aspects from this, like be it a machine or a tool. Their job is to use many, many different methods of recording audio and implementing these sounds, be it things like the engine from a vehicle or the gearbox, or how the wheels kind of behave on different ground types. Basically, they are capturing the sound character of a machine. Now, the last but not least department, quality assurance, they use very, very different methods of testing and test plans and other kind of different test approaches when it comes to testing our game, be it like maps or, of course, vehicles and other elements of the game. For example, vehicles and tools, they're tested with a so-called master sheet, as you can see here, that is very, very modular. So depending on if we're testing a tractor or a trailer or a cultivator, there's like different test cases that apply or don't apply. And basically these test cases, they always grow with the projects that we work on, and with the different kind of, basically over the years we kind of implement and improve more and more on these test plans of things that we then learn, because you always learn from past mistakes and whatnot. So this is a very nice way of basically improving the work in QA. It's also very important to include QA in things like gameplay testing, multiplayer testing, because if you've played Farming Simulator 22, for example, it was the first game that we've implemented the production chains into, and so the player would be able to basically take their yield, like for example wheat, and then bring it to the flour mill to create some flour, and bring that to the bakery to create other products like cake, for example. And the idea was very good on a concept, but then suddenly while playtesting, QA realized, well, how is it going to work in multiplayer? Like my player 1 is on one farm, player 2 is on a different farm, and that player 2 owns that flour mill. What happens if player 1 wants to sell something there? What happens if they're maybe like a hired contractor of the other farm? And all of these questions that start to appear once QA gets their hands on things. And that's why it's very important to include them at a very, very early stage, because more or less it's their task to make sure that new features not only work, but they're also supposed to be fun. So also for a bug tracking database, we at Giants use Mantis. Why? It works best for our needs and it's free. And we, as I mentioned in the beginning, we can create custom plugins for it. So as mentioned earlier, it works very great with our planner that we have. So basically in this example here, you can see that we're able to link assets that we have defined in the planner directly in our bug tracker. So we can like create bugs, directly link an asset, and it's super easy to find them down the road again. Another large part of QA is managing the support for our peripheral devices. So anything from high brand names in steering wheels, joysticks, gamepads, to some very exotic stuff sometimes. We need to make sure that everything works in the game and is supported. So if we get like a case, like a support case where somebody's having problems, usually QA tries to track down a wheel online, be it through even like used, if it's like eBay or some other way to get it. And then we create default template mappings via XML for it to see where issues are and kind of include them like in a patch down the road or in the next project, of course. So as you can see, sometimes these support cases can actually turn into nice supported mappings in the game. Also part of our QA team is our localization team. They work with a localization tool that we came up with ourselves, which is used across several of our projects because it's very, very important to be consistent, and this helps. This is why we're also using a glossary in this particular localization tool. It allows for very easy importing and exporting as well to like Excel, for example. And this also is of course great when we work with external localization or translation partners. It also features a very, very handy tag system. So if we have like certain strings that are like relevant for submission or certification to a platform like Sony or Microsoft, then we can, for example, tag these relevant strings to be sure to not touch them or translate them in a literal way, because these are actually required to be as they're basically stated and stay that way. And it also allows us to search across several games and projects and not just one if we need to find different strings and whatnot. Now, before we come to an end, there's like two more things that I want to touch on. One big thing is crossplay. Crossplay has affected our product pipeline very, very heavily. So I'm going to explain to you why. Crossplay is very important for us because we like that it basically allows players around the world to stay connected and play together regardless of their platform. However, it introduced some challenges that we had to think about when designing like the product pipeline for Farming Simulator 22, where we initially added crossplay as it was a first-time feature for us as well. So we had to think about how to connect different players on different like hardware platforms and multiplayer due to different handling on each platform. So for example, on consoles, there's no direct connection that's allowed between these users. We had to think about voice chat as well. Each platform uses like very, very different and distinct voice data packages. So usually it wouldn't be possible to just talk directly with them. They would have to rely on like third-party software, which we didn't like. We wanted for them to be able to talk directly in game. Also, we needed to know how to handle ownership of things like DLC or user-generated content in multiplayer. What if only one person, for example, owns a DLC? Is everybody still able to connect? Who can use the vehicles from it? Things like that, basically. And how do we handle like platform-exclusive DLC, like skins or platform-specific like downloadable content on certain platforms? How would that work in multiplayer? And the most important question was probably, how are we going to patch all of these platforms at the same time? Because PC and Mac, they're easy. We can just basically shoot out an update whenever we want to. But for platforms like Microsoft and Sony, there's like very defined and sometimes like long certification periods that need to take place. So how do we do this to implement crossplay in FS22? Well, we started with the netcode for multiplayer. Since no direct connection is allowed, we created a worldwide relay server system that would connect clients across all platforms. We have server locations in big major cities across the world for this to basically get that job done. For voice chat, we were going to switch to the Opus audio codec, as it is a great royalty-free and open source solution, which is important to us, and it fit our needs perfectly in this case. For patches and releases, we had to definitely synchronize all of the builds. Once we decided, okay, we're going to patch something, we had to think about which platform is going to take the longest to be certified. So this was basically what we would be using as a baseline for a release, so in planning deadlines and whatnot. So if we know that, for example, be it PlayStation or Xbox, they would take the longest to be certified, we would take that basically as, or that certification period as a baseline for the final release date, and then go backwards from there. And this is definitely needed because we have around 10 different platforms that we currently build builds on for each release. So this like PC, Mac, PlayStation, Xbox, Epic, Steam, and so much more. And of course our dedicated server versions as well. Now for user-generated content and DLCs, we decided that this feature would become something that's modular. So if a host would own a DLC or a mod, they could then, at the creation of basically the multiplayer session, decide would they want to activate this or not. And this way, even players would be able to join the game session, even if they did not have that particular DLC content. Now for platform exclusive DLC and promotional content, like we had these nice sweaters for platforms, for example. So if you would have the game on Xbox, you would have like an Xbox sweater unlocked for your character and so on. And for this kind of content, we would patch this directly into the game, and this way people could even connect to the multiplayer session, even if technically it would be part of the build, but they wouldn't have it unlocked. So there was no join restrictions of any kind. Now, last but not least, I want to touch on modding and user-generated content and why this means so much to us. We have an amazing community out there that is very passionate about the game and so creative when it comes to creating more ways and thinking about how the game can be played. And it's also very important for the life cycle of a game such as Farming Simulator, because they are constantly innovating the game around farming, and they usually tend to think outside the box as well, which brings a fresh wind to the series after it's launched. So mods have always been a thing on PC, but I believe we were one of the very first, if not the first game to allow mods on consoles. You might be questioning like how did we do that and why? Well, because usually on PC, if you install a mod, you download it, you install it, you hope it doesn't break your game. For consoles, the platforms are very encased, and it has to be much safer than this. This is why we created the Giants Mod Hub. It's a platform that lets the user download high quality mods for free that are tested by us here at Giants from one single trusted source, and that's all directly embedded in-game. So basically players can start the game and directly download mods from there. We have an exclusive team of Mod Hub testers that manage the Mod Hub. They basically overlook incoming mod submissions and test them both on PC and consoles directly for like compatibility within the game. So the nice thing about this is that the Mod Hub team is always in close collaboration with the modder, trying to basically give them tips and hints on how to improve the mod and basically make it adhere to guidelines and whatnot, which we're gonna talk about here. The testing process kind of looks like this. So any modder can create an account on Mod Hub, and submit their user-generated content to the mod hub team, and there it will be assigned to a tester. The mod has to pass like several stages before a release. So there's like several guidelines that they need to adhere to. There's some compliance checks. 80% of the time a mod is rejected is usually in this early stage because there's something obvious that might have been overlooked. But afterwards a mod would then go onto a functionality check on PC and then a quick check on console to see if there are any other shader or visual issues. And if all is fine, then of course it's released. For modders themselves, because we want to support this, of course, we offer several incentives. So we have a reward program, which basically means that all downloads generate some kind of revenue for the modder, and that is basically paid out in regular intervals. Or the modder can also choose to instead donate the amount that they would be getting to a charity instead for twice the amount. And aside from the reward program, we also have the award program. So the award program basically states that after reaching several milestones, we will basically reward the modder with a so-called plaque, as you can see here, which they can then show off to friends and family at home. There's one for the first console release of a mod, which is red. Not everybody gets that one because there are some very strict rules about console releases. And then we have bronze, silver, and gold after reaching higher download milestones. So basically, this is a way for us to show appreciation to the modding community and saying thank you for being passionate about the game and for wanting to give something back to the whole farming simulator community. So, as a takeaway, to sum everything up, the farming simulator production pipeline and a couple of things that might be helpful for you if you're developing a game in a similar matter. Proof of concept and setting up a scope is fundamental very, very early in the stage of a project to make sure that you are actually able to carry out and plan what you can do so you can deliver in the end. It's very important to include all development departments very early on in the process. So we can basically have this early inclusion, which comes with lots of feedback from everybody and is just better for the product as a whole. We advocate also trying to kind of automate the build process and delivery, especially if you build for more than just a single platform. When it comes to like crossplay and whatnot, you'll probably be doing that. This helps in basically having so much more time for other important things. And we also, of course, definitely can say that we see crossplay as the future. So don't be afraid to face new challenges if you want to approach it, because reaping the rewards definitely will be worth your trouble. And that pun is intended. And if you also plan to kind of have some form of user-generated content, try to incentivize that, because it is going to reward players, it is going to reward modders, and it's going to allow the game to grow as a whole, and everybody involved will be happy. So that brings us to the end of our talk today. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody who attended. It's been an absolute honor being part here at the Games Job Fair, and I wish you all an amazing time at the convention. So thank you everybody for joining.